Hey everyone, welcome to this deep dive. All right, today we're tackling something that I'm sure a lot of you are thinking about already, and that is this YouTube TV price hike.
Okay.
So we've got two articles here, hot off the presses today, December 12th, 2024, from CBS News and the AP News, and we're not just going to skim the headlines here. We're going to really dig deep into, why is this happening? What does it mean for streaming in general? And most importantly, what does it mean for you?
Yeah, I mean, it's a big deal, right? Especially now, right before the holidays, everyone's thinking about, watching football, the holiday special.
Yeah, exactly. You want to get cozy on the couch. It's like the worst time for them to do this.
Right.
So let's get right into it. YouTube TV's base plan, it's going up by $10. So from $72.99 to $82.99 a month. And this is effective right now for new subscribers and then for existing subscribers. That kicks in on January 13th.
Yeah. I know.
It never ends. It feels like every time I turn around, another service is raising their prices. And you know what? This new price puts YouTube TV right on par with that Disney Hulu plus live TV bundle. So I think that's pretty interesting, right? Are they all kind of matching each other now? Or
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's a really good point. When you think about it, this isn't new for YouTube TV. They launched in 2017, and it was only $35 a month.
Right.
2019, it was $50. And then they just raised prices in March of this year, too.
Yeah. And, they always say it's the rising cost of content, right? And we hear that a lot, but it does make you wonder, what is really driving those costs up? For example, the NFL streaming rights that they've been bidding on, that adds a lot of expense to these platforms.
Right. That makes sense. So it's not just about adding more channels then, because I noticed they did add a bunch of new channels this year, which I'm not complaining about, but I'm sure that impacts, their cost too.
Absolutely. They have to make that package appealing to compete, right? But of course, that means more licensing fees, and then that cost gets passed on to us.
Right. It's like you can't win. It really makes you wonder if we're headed back to the same place we were with cable. Are streaming services going to become just as expensive as those big cable packages we were trying to get away from?
Yeah, I mean, it's a valid concern. A lot of people are thinking about this now. Yeah, streaming services offer more flexibility than cable, but these price increases, they make you wonder about, how affordable is it really going to be in the long run?
Exactly. Yeah. It's like I'm going in circles here.
Yeah.
I cut the cord to save money, and now streaming is getting just as pricey.
Yeah.
So are we reaching this point where these prices just aren't sustainable for the average viewer? I mean, what do you think?
I think that's what we're seeing now. It's like this recalibration of the entire industry,
What do you mean by recalibration?
Well, I think for a long time, the focus was just get as many subscribers as possible.
Right.
Spend whatever you need to get people to sign up, even if it means losing money.
Right.
But now that there are so many streaming services, it's like the focus is shifting to making a profit. And that means finding ways to make more money, whether that's price increases, adding commercials, or cracking down on password sharing.
Right, like we've seen with Netflix and Apple TV Plus and Disney Plus.
Exactly.
So is that it then? Are we just stuck with these price hikes? Or are there other options out there?
Well, there are a few things that might happen. We might see more bundles, like companies teaming up to offer packages with multiple streaming services at a discount. Like we've kind of seen with Hulu plus live TV,
right,
where you get the on-demand stuff and the live channels.
So are we just going back to cable packages? Just rebranded for the streaming era?
Not necessarily. I think the key difference here is the flexibility. With these streaming bundles, you can choose what services you want, and you can add or remove them whenever you need to.
That's a good point.
Yeah. Another possibility is that we'll see more and more streaming services with commercials, offering a cheaper option for people who don't want to pay as much.
Yeah, that makes sense, like we've seen with Netflix and Disney Plus now.
Yeah, exactly. And then there's the whole issue of password sharing, which is becoming like a big target for these companies trying to make more money.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, I have to admit, I've shared my login with family members before, but it does feel like those days might be over.
It's very likely. Cracking down on password sharing, that's an easy way for these platforms to get more subscribers without actually adding new viewers.
Right.
But, who knows how effective it'll really be. People always find creative ways to get around the rules.
That's true. So what do you think about all these free streaming services that are popping up, like Pluto TV and Tubi with the commercials? Could those become a real threat to the paid services?
Right. I think it's definitely something to watch. Free services are appealing to a lot of people, especially those who are feeling overwhelmed by all these subscription costs. But they usually have less content and more ads.
Right. So it's really about finding the right balance for you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Cost, content, convenience.
Yeah. With all these different things changing, it's really hard to say what the future of streaming will look like. But I have a feeling it's going to be pretty interesting.
It definitely will be. It's a tough question, and it's one that I think we're all kind of struggling with right now. Like, streaming still gives us more choices than cable, but with prices going up all the time, it's like, how do we actually afford it all in the long run?
Right. Like, what does that actually look like for our budgets?
Right, exactly. And you know what I think is interesting is that it seems like the whole streaming industry is kind of going through a shift right now.
What do you mean by that? Like a shift in what way?
Well, for the longest time, it was all about growth, right? Like, get as many subscribers as you can, even if you're losing money doing it.
Yeah, makes sense.
But now that we have so many streaming services, it seems like they're all trying to figure out how to actually make money.
Right. Like turn a profit.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so that means they're looking at different ways to increase revenue. And that could be raising prices, adding commercials, cracking down on password sharing, like we were just talking about.
Right. It's like all these things that we're seeing with Netflix, Apple TV Plus, and Disney Plus.
Exactly. So, yeah, it's a pretty big shift.
So does that mean we're just stuck with these price hikes then? Or are there other things that could happen?
Well, I think there are a few possibilities. One thing we might see is more bundles.
Bundles.
Yeah, like companies teaming up to offer packages with like multiple streaming services at a discount.
Okay.
So like a little bit like what we've seen with Hulu plus live TV,
Right.
where you get Hulu's on-demand stuff plus the live channels all in one. So
it's like we're going back to cable packages then? Just like rebranded for streaming?
I don't know if I'd say that necessarily. The big difference, I think, is flexibility. With these streaming bundles, you'd have more control over what services you want, and you could change them up whenever you want.
Right. That makes sense.
Yeah. Another thing that we might see is even more streaming services with commercials, like offering a cheaper option for people who don't mind the ads.
Yeah. Makes sense. We've already seen Netflix and Disney Plus go that route.
Exactly. And then, of course, there's the whole password sharing thing, which seems like it's going to be a big focus for these companies moving forward.
Yeah, I can see that. It's an easy way for them to boost their numbers without actually adding new viewers.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
But it'll be interesting to see how it all plays out because, people are always going to find creative ways to get around the rules.
Oh, absolutely. So what about all these free streaming services that are popping up now, like Pluto TV and Tubi with the commercials? Could those become like a real alternative to the paid services?
It's definitely a trend to keep an eye on. Free services are really appealing to a lot of people.
Yeah.
Especially if they're feeling overwhelmed by all these subscription costs.
Totally.
But the downside is that they usually have less content and more ads.
Yeah, that's the trade-off.
Right, exactly. So it really comes down to what's most important to you.
Like figuring out that balance between the content and the convenience factor.
Exactly.
It's hard to say what the future of streaming will look like with all these moving parts, but I think it's going to be an interesting ride.
I think so too, definitely.
Yeah. And you know what I keep thinking about is how all this stuff actually affects, the viewers.
Yeah.
Like us, we talk about these trends and price hikes, but how do you actually figure out like what works best for you? Like what you want to watch and how much you want to spend?
Right. I think it starts with really understanding what you're looking for in a streaming service. Like, what do you value the most? You know, is it having access to live events?
Right.
Like sports or award shows?
Right.
Is it about having a huge library of on-demand content? Or is it more about having like specific shows or movies that you love?
I like that. It's like making a list of your must-haves and your nice-to-haves.
Yeah, exactly.
And then you can kind of compare that to what each service offers and how much it costs. It's so easy to just get caught up in like the hype of a new show or a new feature.
Right.
But it's important to think about the bigger picture. Like, is it actually worth it for you?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And don't be afraid to shop around. Try different services out. A lot of them have free trials, so you can see if you like it before you actually pay for it. And remember, you don't have to stick with just one service. You can always switch things up depending on what you want to watch.
That's a good point. I always feel like I get stuck in a routine. But it makes sense to be more flexible, especially with these prices changing so much. So with all this talk about competition between these streaming services, do you think that's ultimately a good thing for the viewers?
I think it can be. Competition can lead to better products and services. Right. Like in the case of streaming, that could mean more diverse content, better interfaces, maybe even lower prices if they start really competing for subscribers.
So maybe these price hikes could actually be a good thing in the long run. If it pushes these companies to be more creative and actually give viewers what they want,
That's a good way to look at it.
Yeah.
The streaming world is still changing so much. It's kind of exciting to see where it goes next.
It is. Well, we covered a lot today, from the details of this YouTube TV price hike to the bigger trends that are shaping streaming. I know it can feel overwhelming, but I think the main thing to remember is that knowledge is power. The more you understand how this stuff works, the better decisions you can make about your own viewing choices.
Exactly. It's all about enjoying the content that you love. So find the platforms that work best for you. And happy streaming.
Great advice. And that wraps up our deep dive for today. Until next time, stay curious.